Hello, econ students. This video, I'm going to go over some of the things that we covered on Monday, the 23rd, just to review some of that stuff since we were kind of covering it in a different format and maybe it didn't work the best in the Zoom meeting that we have. And so I'm going to go through some of the notes that we had on Monday so you can get it a second time. Okay? So the video will be relatively short, just covering the things that we did for gross domestic product. And these notes, what you're looking at right here should be the same as what you have. And so you can really just kind of copy what I have right here. So one of the things that I didn't have a chance to talk about was the background. So we're moving into macroeconomics. And macroeconomics is really kind of a young field of economics. And the fact that it didn't exist that long, hasn't existed that long, not really since the Great Depression did it become a big deal, because prior to the Great Depression, people just focused on kind of economics in the terms of supply and demand, profit and loss, those sorts of things, how a price is set. But macroeconomics is how is the entire economy doing, and this wasn't a big deal until we have a depression that lasted for almost 10 plus years. And so then they started to look at some of these big economic indicators, and one of the main ones being GDP. And so that's what we're going to start our focus on, is what is GDP, why does it matter, and how that is an indicator for the health of the overall economy. So this is one of the key indicators for the health of the overall economy. The other ones will be unemployment and inflation. So this is the kind of the best picture that you can have in your head for what is GDP. So GDP is gross domestic product. One of the things that we talked about in class is gross is going to represent total. Domestic is in a country's borders, right? So in a country. And then product is how much is produced. Okay, so total in a country produced, gross domestic product. And so we defined what gross domestic product was. And our definition really has three key parts to it. Okay? The three key parts are going to be the dollar value. Dollar value. And so we look in terms of dollar values because it's really difficult to compare cars and TVs and iPads and all of those things unless you convert it to a common unit, basically. And so we convert all of this stuff to what's the dollar value of those things. So even if we produce 100 cars or 50 TVs or 1,000 iPads, we convert all of that to what's the dollar value. So we're looking in terms of dollars when we look at GDP. Okay. The second thing that we looked at is it has to be a final goods and service. All right. So all final goods or services. All right, so hopefully I understand the goods and services part. Here, it's all final, so it's not intermediate. And so I gave the example with a house. What is included in GDP is the house. What's not included in GDP are all the things that go into making the house. Otherwise, you would be counting things twice. So if you counted all of the lumber that it takes to build it, and all of the bricks that it takes to build it, and all of the cement and the nails, and if you counted all of that and you counted the final good, you'd be counting everything twice. And we don't want to count everything twice. We only want to count it one time. So we look at the final goods and services and not all the intermediate. If you take my simple example that we do often is lemonade. So what's included is the cup of lemonade. What's not included is the sugar and the cup itself and maybe the straw, because if we included all of those and the cup of lemonade, then we would be, again, counting everything twice, and we only want to count it one time. So we do the final good, not all the intermediate goods. And the last part of our definition, so all dollar value of all final goods and services, and then it's produced within, sorry, that's getting sloppy. So within a country's borders in a given year. Okay? So produced within a country's borders in a given year. And so our example that we used from class is we had this old house, we'll call it 1950s house, and we had this new house, let's call it 2020 house. And so this 1950s house was built in the 1950s and bought and sold every once in a while from 1950 to 2020. And then we have this 2020 house that was built in 2020. So this one was built in 1950, and this one was built in 2020. Whoops, not 2002, 2020. Okay? And so what's included in GDP for the year 2020? If this one right here was resold in 2020, is that included? And the answer to that is no, it's not, because we already included it once. So just like we don't count intermediate goods, we only count final goods, like in our example up for point number 2, we also only include things in one single year. So if it was counted in GDP in 1950, that's it. It just counts in 1950 and it can't count again in 2020, even if that same house is resold in 2020. So this house, since it was produced in the year 2020, is included in 2020 and never again is it included. Well, if you look at our little chart over here, this shows real growth in US GDP over the last, this is something like 120 years or so. And you can see how much GDP has grown over time, increasing significantly, especially in the last 40 years or so. And this is only at 14 trillion. We're at something like 19 trillion right now. Okay, so there are two ways to calculate GDP, and we really kind of split this down into two things. So first of all, you have to understand that if you spend money, that's exactly the same as income for somebody else. So if I spend $10, somebody gets $10. So it doesn't matter if we count the spending or if we count the income, these two things are going to be equal to each other. Okay? And so those are the two ways that economists calculate GDP, is by spending, the expenditure approach, or income, the income approach. So under the expenditure approach, we said there were basically 4 groups that spend in the economy. All right, so the simple formula is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And so who are those 4 groups? Okay, so the first one, the first thing I'm going to write it on. Well, actually, you can see it over here. I apologize. All right, so these 4 groups are the 4 that are found right over here. So the first one is consumption. That one's consumers. What they consume, right? So what do normal people buy? What they spend their money on. The next one is business investment. All right, so investing in things like machines to run their factory. The third one is government, spends money. They spend money on everything from police cars to senator salaries to schools to fire trucks, everything like that is government spending. And then the final one, we want to kind of subtract 2 things right here. And so the 2 things that we subtract are what we sell to other people. So we produce in the US and then sell to foreign people. We want to subtract what is produced everywhere else, right? So what's produced in, let's say, Germany, and we buy. Okay, so we want to subtract that because that's spending that we're spending stuff on, but not produced in the US. So we don't want to include this one, so we subtract it. We do want to include this one because we're producing it here, but somebody else is buying it. Okay, so those are the kind of 4 groups of buyers, of spenders: consumers, businesses, the government, and then foreign people buying our stuff. So if you take all of that stuff and you add up all the spending, that equals GDP. Another way to look at it is if consumers are spending, businesses are spending, government spending, and foreign people are buying our stuff, all of that added up is the same as income for everybody. So if you add up everybody's income, you're going to get GDP as well. Okay. The final thing that we did in class is we tried to look at an example to calculate real and nominal GDP. So this is going to be really important for us to kind of take this slow and to look at an example. So we had the year 2000 and the year 2001. And what we're doing here is we're calculating nominal or real GDP. So the first thing is, what does nominal mean and what does real mean? So nominal, what nominal is going to mean is current. We look at the current year's GDP. What real means is adjusted. Okay, so nominal is simple. You look at the current year. Real, you have to adjust it for inflation. So let's look at our example. In the example that we had in class was in the year 2000, we had 20 cups, and each cup was $1. We had 10 iPads, and each iPad was $5. We had 10 shoes, and each shoe was $5. So in order to find nominal, let's do nominal. We just take the current year's prices and we figure out what's our dollar value in this year. Okay, so what's our dollar value of cups? It's 20. What's our dollar value of iPads? It's 50. What's our dollar value of shoes produced? It's 50. If we add those up, dollar value in that year is 120. And we're going to leave a column for real right here in just a second. All right, so what about 2001? Well, we can compare what happened between 2000 and 2001. So here we had 10 cups. We had 5 iPads. And we had 15 shoes. All right, so let's look at nominal and real GDP here as well. All right, so cups ended up being $3 a piece, iPads being $6 a piece, and shoes being $7 a piece. Okay. So how do I find nominal GDP in the year 2001? Well, I just take the current year's prices and I multiply it by how much we produced. So we produced 10 cups at $3 a piece, so this would be $30. Produced 5 iPads at $6 a piece, this is $30. I produced 15 shoes at $7 a piece, that'd be $105. Add those together, it should be 165. So if we compare nominal GDP in the year 2000 to nominal GDP in the year 2001, we see that GDP went up. But if you notice that the prices of all of these goods went up as well. Prices went from $1 to $3, $5 to $6, and $5 to $7. So we want to adjust that for inflation. Okay, so we're going to find real adjusted for inflation. So if you take a look at this price, the $3 that we have right here, we want to ignore that inflation and we want to go back and use what our price was originally, which was $1. So we're going to say that cups didn't inflate to $3, but they stayed at $1. And so we produced $10 worth of cups, adjusted for inflation. We don't want to look at the 6, we want to look at the 5 to adjust it for inflation. So we're going to say that iPads were still $5. So we produced, we're still $5. So we produced $25 worth of iPads. So if you notice, the production of cups obviously went down. It didn't go up.